This is Steve Young for the Co-Roundtable. I have based the sort of the thinking I've been doing about moral capitalism to a large extent on a book written by Adam Smith in the 18th century, which most everybody has forgotten. They remember the book by Adam Smith on quote unquote capitalism. He called it On the Origin of the Wealth of Nations. The origin and causes of the wealth of nations. He didn't give a name to the system. He just said, we human beings, we're inventing in the early industrial age with the factory method, new ways of basically creating wealth, which can improve our lives with the products that are made. Think of the steam engine. And also create wealth which can be shared, transferred, transformed into forms of money, which go to various people and improve lives. But his first book was called The Theory of the Moral Sentiments. It was about who we are as people. It was about morality, ethics, or the moral sense. And quickly, by the way, what he was writing about was also written about in China by Mencius in particular, in India by the Buddha talking about the way our mind works, mindfulness, is focusing sort of on our moral sense. It's internal to us. And Aristotle wrote about his book about ethics, and he was talking about virtue, which is an internal moral sense. But the issue for so many people is, why should I care about ethics? Why should I care about morality? How much money is it going to make me? Is it going to make me president of the United States? What's the good of being nice to people? If I can get them to do what I want to help me, why not? A skepticism about things that are intangible, ideal, aspirational. If I can pull the wool over your eyes once and get away with it, hey, what's to stop me? Why should I need a good feeling about my relationship with you? Well, interestingly enough, there's some reasons. There's some sort of biological, psychological reasons as to why the moral sense really is very important. There's a new book out called The Good Life by Robert Waldinger and Mark Schultz, published in the US by Simon & Schuster, making the case for happiness. Basically, that happiness comes about not from the amount of money we have, not from maybe how many people love us and we don't do anything in return, but happiness comes from our relationships with other people, which are functions of our moral sense. This is what Adam Smith was talking about. Do you have something inside you which can empathize with somebody else? Which is, are you aware of other people? Do you have relationships? Are you comfortable with other people? Do you have friends? Do you share your feelings? Do they share their feelings with you? And it turns out, this book tracks a number of graduates to a comparative study, some graduates of Harvard and some 14-year-old boys growing up in Boston's most disadvantaged neighborhoods over decades. And what they study in both cohorts, at the end, they interview, every so often they interview the people in this group as basically on all aspects of their life, and then they correlate what sort of comes across as the happier people with how they live their lives. And it turns out there's a correlation. Positive connections to other people is at least as important as proper nutrition, physical exercise, adequate sleep, and the avoidance of harmful habits such as smoking. Yet it is easy to take these relationships for granted in today's individualistic and hyper-competitive societies. What they focus on, however, is skill development. In order to improve your happiness, social fitness, what they call it, you develop skills at social fitness. This is not rocket science, but how many of us actually do it? I mean, I have memories of resentment, particularly at a particular great-grandmother, who was always after me for not being proper and polite and doing this and doing that. And I was 5 years old, 6 years old, and all of a sudden, it was kind of like, hey, I want to do this, right? Well, what she was probably doing intuitively, as her parents had done for her, was trying to be good to me, kind to me, in training me in social fitness, okay? I wasn't smart enough to really sort of get a hold of that. And one could go on with other ways we learn social fitness. Where is social fitness? Do we take stock of our social fitness from time to time and feel good about ourselves? Then at the same time, There was another article in Time magazine recently, which is called The Daily Habits Used by Happiness Experts. It's about happiness. Again, happiness. Interestingly to me, this is a big theme these days in the United States, where we have a lot of unhappy people. And if you look at statistics on suicide rates among the young, drug deaths, addiction, there are lots of social indications of people whose lives are not happy. And again, these happiness experts try to refer to getting along with other people, your relationship skills with other people. They make a difference. Then I saw another article, different point of view, but goes to the same point. This is an article in Newsweek, which is talking about new inferences about us human beings gathered from Neanderthals, who lived over 100,000 years ago. And the question is, why did Neanderthals disappear and our species, Homo sapiens, not only survive, but spread all over the world and develop this modern civilization we have? And one of the sort of thoughts or inferences from looking at the DNA is that our brains somehow develop slightly differently and more adaptively in the area of language and communication. The assumption is, the hypothesis is, that enabled our ancestors to become social beings better than the Neanderthals did. We could collaborate, we could form hunting teams, the women could get together and do whatever women did 10,000 years ago. We could have family structures that passed on learning and things like that. And where does all that sit inside each of us, this facility that made Homo sapiens successful in the environment? It's in our moral sense, our language, our communicative skills. There was another study I ran across, a sad one, in Romania, under the former dictator Ceausescu. Apparently, there were over 170,000 Romanian children who were abandoned by their families and placed in orphanages. This was a study of these children as adults, and they seem to have had a higher incidence of negative neurodevelopment problems, including attention deficit, hyperactivity disorder, autism, and a host of pathological behaviors. And he traces this to that lack of skill building as young people in an orphanage when they were just ignored by adults and they had no families. So I think we can conclude from this that we can make ourselves happy by engaging with others. Maybe that's counterintuitive. I know a lot of people think other people are, and I feel sometimes, frankly, other people can be a source of stress, a source of tension. They're an annoyance. They get in my way. I disagree with them. But I need to sort of stop those kind of things and say, yeah, well, that's true. But if I didn't have a capacity to engage with other people, wouldn't I be really miserable?